Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad that you could join us today. I'm Marin, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Please make sure that your microphones and web cameras are disabled during the presentation to provide a smooth webinar. During the webinar, if you have any technical difficulties, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You're welcome to use that chat box during the webinar for comments and insights. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our upcoming webinars are on next Tuesday, so that will be Tuesday at 3 p.m., the 5th. We'll be hearing from Matthew Tyler. He'll be giving an introduction to Chinese genealogy webinar. Following that, on Thursday at 3 p.m., we will have a webinar with Angela Sneakus. She will be talking about Lutherans in Lithuania. The next Thursday, we'll have a webinar from Catherine Grant. All that calendar information is updated on our website. And if there isn't the next coming webinar, it will be updated shortly. If you'd like to access a previous webinar, you can visit our webinar index on our website or search our YouTube channel. At this time, there are a few webinars that have been broadcasted but have not been posted online at this time. They will be posted shortly. We apologize for any inconvenience. We also post those recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts, so make sure you're following us there if you'd like automatic updates with that. For today's webinar, we're pleased to hear from Sarah Stoddard, who will be giving a presentation on DNA, and we'll just get started to the presentation so Sarah can tell us more.
Hi, so my past couple webinars, I've given a brief overview of a bunch of different things to do with DNA. And so this presentation, I'll try and kind of address some of the things that I've said in the past. Okay, I can get you some more details on this. We'll talk about this in the future. This is where I'm going to go into a little more detail about some different features and tools that are available for DNA research, DNA analysis. I'll talk about some random things that I've had questions about since, such as XDNA research and DNA privacy stuff. And so hopefully you'll get more of a taste of just a variety of different other deeper subjects to do with DNA. So this first slide is kind of a review of the 5 main companies we talked about in the past that provide DNA testing. All 5 of them offer autosomal DNA testing, which is the kind of testing that gives you an ethnicity prediction and also usually gives you match listings. Some of the companies will give you 3-in-1 results, meaning they'll tell you also what your Y-DNA group is or your mtDNA group is, which is another kind of DNA test that you can take. And there are millions of testers in all of these databases put together. The 23andMe and Ancestry are the biggest companies. Some of the companies will take raw data from other companies as transfers, but some will not. Any of these companies will let you download your raw data to transfer it elsewhere, but the 2 companies, the 2 big ones actually, 23andMe and Ancestry, they don't accept transfers from other companies. They want you to get their kit, buy their kit in order to test with them. And we'll talk a little bit more later some other things you can do with transferring your DNA besides transferring them to a different company to compare with more matches. And each company kind of has their own process for downloading raw data. Each company you might transfer to has their own upload process. That could be an entire webinar. It probably wouldn't be the most exciting one. So that's just a place where I'm going to tell you, get good instructions for whatever kind of transfer you're trying to do. There are some smaller companies out there that are not on this list. A lot of them don't do matching. Some of them might. But the matches are really what's most useful for genealogical research. And some of these companies too, you don't have as established of a reputation with them. They don't have as good of privacy policies, guarantees of how good of a product you're going to get. So just a heads up on that. And there are companies out there that you can test through specifically for medical purposes. And that's not something I'm really going to address in this presentation. That's something I'd advise you to talk to your physician about. However, some of the tests I am going to talk about, some of these companies are starting to have, or maybe have had in the past, features to do with health and medical information. So most of the time, pretty much every company will have these main features in common of ethnicity results, match lists. There is one exception on that big 5 list, which is living DNA. They don't have match lists yet, but that is something they will be premiering soon. These companies will have tools to sort your matches that are either manual or, automatic. So as far as manual, meaning they'll let you make notes and things like that. Some of the companies have health features. Pretty much every company on that list at this point, except for Family Tree DNA and Living DNA, is doing some sort of thing in the health feature department. And each company will have ways to share your results with others, whether others that have tested in the database or just, a family member you might want to share it with. And there's different privacy setting features that each company has as well. There are less regulations currently on privacy of consumer DNA tests than there are, for example, some sort of medical test you might get for a doctor. So my advice for you, if that is something that you really want to know about, is to read the company's privacy policies. Larger companies have usually more stringent policies. Some smaller companies don't have any privacy or terms and conditions as far as to do with your information. So I know from personal experience that Ancestry, 23andMe, and Myheritage have some pretty good and extensive privacy policies. And at the end, I'm also going to include a link to a good article from the New York Times about and DNA and privacy and how to protect your privacy. And just like I said, read the terms and conditions, make sure you know what you're giving the company permission to do. There's different things you can opt in or opt out on. And you usually, with the company you've tested with, you can give permission and take it away. But if, for example, you gave them permission to share your information for medical research, it's harder to get that information back. But now we're gonna kind of go into the companies and talk about these different features, except I'm not going to talk a lot about the ethnicity just because we've covered that a lot in prior conversations, and each company just kind of has their own way of doing that you can learn different things from. So kind of what I'm highlighting here is features each company has that I think are really cool or unique. So with Ancestry DNA, I just want to remind you that something that Ancestry is known for is their use of search engines. Their search engine capacity is really great. So it's not surprising that they have adapted that ability to your DNA results as well. They have a variety of handy search features built into their match lists. These are some of my favorite things to do with my matches, is to search by surname or by a location. I love being able to make notes on my matches where I've figured out, okay, this is from my great grandma's family. Everybody that is the color green, for instance, I could pick that as a color-coded dot to put next to a match that I'm trying to determine how a group of people are related. You can filter where it'll only show you matches that have trees, only matches that you've sent messages to, only new matches. And I really, other than the sorting and searching, I really appreciate the connection to the Ancestry user trees. That is super helpful for research and for trying to use the DNA in order to prove or discover genealogical information. So right now, Ancestry and Myheritage are the only two companies that have, most of the companies have some sort of tree feature where you can put a tree with your results, but Ancestry and Myheritage are the only ones that will let you build trees that have attached historical records, because these sites actually also specialize in having historical records in addition to DNA. So another cool feature Ancestry has is through lines, and this is their attempt to help you prove your family tree is accurate using DNA. It will attempt to predict DNA matches for you based on shared matches who have trees. Or actually, it'll attempt to predict, let me rephrase that, it'll attempt to predict who your ancestors are based on your shared matches that have trees. So this is an example of one of my lines. It's predicting a third great grandfather based on me matching a bunch of people that descend from that same third great grandfather. And like anything else that's sort of a mass created tree, you want to verify the linkages and the relationships, because it can get things wrong, but it's a super useful tool to try and make it so that you can start building your tree from your DNA matches if you don't have much of a tree built yet, or if you even want to verify the tree you have with DNA. So you can share your results with other users in the system, or with family members or others who may not even be a match to you, but may be interested in looking at your results. They have 3 levels of sharing. There's a manager, who is the person that owns the test, and actually the owners who owns the test. The manager can do a lot, as far as it's the highest level of sharing, where they can make notes and view pretty much everything you can view. A collaborator can do limited things, basically. All they can do is make notes on matches, and then a viewer can just see your results and can't make any changes to the profile or to your notes or anything. So just kind of look at those settings and decide if you're going to share your DNA results with someone, what level of access you'd like to grant them. I've been a collaborator or a manager on various kits before of people I've helped with their research. And that can be really a good way for me to be able to help them to see what they have. And your privacy settings, one thing people ask me a lot is, can I take the test and make it so nobody knows who I am? You can actually take a DNA test and you can totally turn off matching, so nobody else who's a match to you even knows that you're in there. You can strictly just look at the ethnicity results that you're interested in, but you can also, make your self as anonymous looking and put as little information as possible. Ancestry DNA has recently premiered a health feature called Ancestry Health, which I'll get to in a second. They've had something called Ancestry Traits for a little bit longer. It tries to predict random things such as eye color from your existing test. Ancestry Health is new as of this month, and there will be different levels of cost and testing that you can do. It will screen for health problems. They are connecting with a third party called PWN Health that will give you, will help provide the results and will give you access to genetic counselors. And they also will allow you to put family health history in a tree format, copying a tree that you might already have, where you can make notes of, my grandfather died of heart disease, or my grandmother died of a stroke, or whatever, so that you can track those kinds of things. Now, there will, as far as the cost goes, the details are still kind of new, but there will be options to do kind of a one-time report or a subscription-based health service that you pay for to renew and get new information over time. Now, with Myheritage, they have their own ways of sorting things, but they are actually have a lot of features that are similar to Ancestry. And They encourage you to connect a tree to your results, which I would definitely connect as well. They allow you to search by shared DNA and segments, by name, which could be, surnames of ancestors, how recent the match is. And one of their tree details options, which I'm going to talk about next, is a feature called Theory of Family Relativity. It's sort of similar to the concept of through lines. It gives you multiple possible theories, though, if they're possible, of how you might relate to a match. So when we talked a bit about the shared centimorgans, for instance, if you share 1,500 centimorgans with another person, that person could be your half sibling, but they could also be an aunt or uncle. And so they will take your amount you match with a person and also use family search trees and historical records from their site, along with the DNA, to try and predict your tree and how it connects to the tree of the person that you're matching. And the way they lay this out is a really good visual if you have a hard time predicting or visualizing something like, what does it mean that this person might be a third cousin? This lays it out very visually for you. Like anything else that's based on a compiled or computer generated tree, you want to verify it before you put it in your own tree, but it's a really cool feature to try and use the DNA and the data they have from trees and records to predict what's in your family tree. Myheritage is also recently getting into the health game. You can get a single report that you buy when you buy a typical autosomal test in a package. You can get those two together, or you can buy the health aspect separately if you just want that, or if you've already done the autosomal test. It'll tell you risks for different conditions, and they'll be adding more to their health feature over time. They also recently bought 2 websites called SNPedia and Promethease, which SNPedia is basically a genetic genealogy wiki. It explains what different genes, where they're found and what their function is known to be. It tells you a lot about haplogroups and the origins of haplogroups. And that has been free. Even though Myheritage just bought it, it will remain free to the public, and Myheritage will be using it as a resource as well to develop their health tools. Promethease was a subscription service you could pay for in the past to get health reports. Basically, it would connect genes in your test results to data from scientific papers about what those genes have been studied for. So anybody who's tested in Promethease in the past, this year their data is all going to be transferred to the Myheritage platform unless you opt out. Promethease, though, will still remain a separate tool from the Myheritage Health reports with its own cost, its own type of results. So it's still kind of going to be its own thing, but Myheritage is running it now. 23andMe, they also have match sorting and searching capacities. They also allow you to put a tree of your own in, though it's not linked to records like Myheritage or Ancestry. So you can use the search filters to, if someone who matches you has a tree, you can search and find, who in my matches has ancestors with the same birthplaces as mine. You can sort by maternal and paternal side. If you have your mother or father tested, you can sort by surname, search by surnames, and you can sort by different features as well, such as how close a match is. When you click on a match, you can see what matches you have in common with them using their relatives in common feature. Now you can do the same thing on Ancestry or Myheritage as far as looking at shared matches, but 23andMe adds a dimension to their relatives in common feature that Ancestry and Myheritage don't have, which is not only can you see say myself and my uncle, we both match this individual, but you can see the relative amounts that you and another person share with a third match, which can be really handy when you're trying to figure out if it's significant that the two of you share that same match, because one of you might be a first cousin to the match and another of you might only be like a sixth cousin to the match, which could just be coincidence that you're both relating to the same person because one's related closely and one's related distantly. So this can help you figure out if you're trying to determine if you and one or more people have a shared ancestor, how far back that ancestor might be. And the shared DNA column is also important to look at because what it means is if it says yes there, not only do you share DNA with those other two matches, but all three of you share DNA on the same segments, the same area of your chromosomes. And that makes common ancestry more probable if all of you share DNA on the same segment. And 23andMe, they'll let you share your ancestry report with other users. There's a few ways to do that. You can send it to somebody who doesn't have an account. You can share it with somebody specific in the DNA relatives, or you can do open sharing where you share certain pieces of information with anybody who's your DNA relative. 23andMe has been doing the health features for longer than anybody else, so they have a lot more things that you get results about in their health test results. The carrier status reports are about whether you carry a gene for a particular condition, that whether or not you have it, it's something you could pass down, say sickle cell anemia, or the genetics for I'm drawing a blank now. There was a condition I was thinking of. But anyways, that's what carrier status means. There's health predisposition, which is more the risk of developing something later in life, such as Alzheimer's or cholesterol problems. And then there's wellness, which talks about things like what type of muscle type you have, what kind of diet might be healthiest for you. And then traits is things like eye color. Does cilantro taste good to you, or does it taste like soap? And there's different costs for each of these kind of reports you can get. So that's something to look more closely at if that's something that interests you. Family Tree DNA, their match list has its own look, and you can sort your matches maternal, paternal if you've had a parent or both parents test, search by surname. One thing to be aware of is they have lower segment thresholds, so sometimes a match will look closer to you on family tree DNA than it might be predicted as say a first to third cousin on family tree DNA. Ancestry would take the same match and say, oh, they're actually a second to fourth cousin, because they have different thresholds for what size of segments that you have in common are significant. And family tree DNA, they'll let you attach a tree from a GEDCOM, and they also have a tree built into their system to have a tree within family tree DNA called MyFamilyTree. So those are both options. X matching, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is something that family tree DNA, they'll show you if you match on a chromosome, an X chromosome with somebody or not. And they'll also show you just in general what chromosomes you match with other users on. This feature is called a chromosome browser, and often if you share the same segment of the same chromosome with another person, you have common ancestry, especially if it's a significant size of segment that you share. So you can't share your results with other users the same way that Ancestry or 23andMe or maybe Myheritage will let you. You either have to give someone who you want to view your results, your login info, which you may or may not want to give someone else your username or password, or you can create a family finder sharing group, which allows group members who also have family tree DNA accounts to view one another's results. So it's not as easy to share your results with other people from family tree DNA. They don't have any health features. It doesn't sound like they have any plans to do that. Now, if you paid attention to the news at all lately, you may have heard stories of law enforcement using commercial DNA tests to solve crimes. Most companies don't directly allow law enforcement access to your test results. So if you just test on Ancestry, they're not going to be able to look at that. Most of these crimes have been solved using an external site that people have uploaded their results to called Gedmatch, which I'll talk about that site a bit later. But Family Tree DNA has made the decision to allow law enforcement access to their database. It's not just open access. They have to submit a request to Family Tree DNA justifying their need to upload a DNA sample from a crime scene or from an unidentified person to look for matches. And typically they can only see the same thing that any other match of yours would see, unless they get some sort of a warrant to get additional information, such as contact information about a match, and they have to show probable cause that it's imperative to solving a serious crime. Living DNA is, like I've said, very new. They don't have matching or health features yet, but they have gotten very good at predicting specific British Isles ancestral regions, which is really intriguing for people who have British Isles ancestry and may not know where exactly in the British Isles their ancestors came from. They're also working on getting this refined in other regions of the world, and they've been getting pretty good at it. And a cool aspect of Living DNA, which I'm kind of excited about, is they're partnering with Find My Past, which is basically the Ancestry.com of the United Kingdom. Find My Past has a ton of records, historical newspapers, British records specifically, but a lot of different random worldwide records. And they want to be able to use this partnership between the two companies to help people make some cool discoveries about their British and Irish roots. That's kind of their angle on partnering with Find My Past. So XDNA, I had someone in a prior webinar pose questions of, what's XDNA? What is it good for? So we're getting away from kind of going through all the companies now and talking about a few random things before the end. So XDNA, you only get it from certain ancestral lines. And some of the companies that we talked about will give you X matching specifically. And the reason they'll do that is because of the specific lines you can inherit it through. You're only going to get it from certain parts of your tree. So you can look at how someone you match a lot on XDNA and kind of be able to guess, oh, they're only from these certain parts of my tree. Men will only get an X from their mothers, and it's usually passed on without much recombining at all to their daughters. And so this chart here shows how a woman inherits XDNA, but basically if you are male, just look at the right-hand side of the chart. Those are the only ancestral lines you're going to get XDNA from, because it's only from your mother's side. So like I said, this can be useful for pinpointing or ruling out which side of your tree, which lines you might relate to a person through if you have a high XDNA match. And another interesting bit of trivia is if you're paternal half-sisters with somebody, you will have an identical X chromosome to one another. And I've known of cases where there are two women that have tested and they're pretty sure they're half-sisters. They may not know exactly how they're half-sisters, but if they match fully on the X, it's because they shared a father. So there are some external tools that are really helpful for analyzing your matches as well. One that I use a lot, it's basically a calculator online, is called DNA Painter. There's all kinds of charts and things, but DNA Painter is a place where you can plug in the amount of centimorgans or the percentage of DNA you share with a person, and it'll give you stats of, okay, these are the possible relationships you have with that person. And then there's another cool tool that's also through the DNA Painter website called What Are the Odds? If you're trying to figure out, you say you know that your grandfather is related to a particular family somehow, but you're maybe not sure who his parents were, but you know he's related because he's matching a bunch of people in the family, you can do a chart of who all the matches are, and you can put hypotheses in different spots in the tree, and it'll crunch all the numbers for you basically and tell you, well, it's higher odds that your grandfather is the son of Rose than he is the son of Henry. So clustering tools is a cool kind of tool that's been come up with to take a lot of the manual labor out of sorting your matches for you. A lot of the companies do have features already that will help you try and sort your matches or figure out which family group they belong to, but these tools take it a step further. They give you a really nice visual breakdown of who matches who in your match list, and these features try to put your matches into sort of family clusters. And there's a few different tools that I'm just going to briefly mention: Genetic Affairs, DNA GEDCOM, and Collins Leads. Collins Leads is kind of a charting system. It is somewhat manual still, but it's a really nice way to visualize your matches and who they're related to. So the way this system works is any matches that are less than 400 centimorgans, you start placing them in the chart by which grandparent of yours they're related through. And you'll start to be able to see patterns in the matches you haven't been able to sort yet as, oh, they match all the people with the orange color code, so they're related through my dad's dad. And there's a whole website about how to use this system and these tables to sort your matches by Dana Leeds, who's the creator of this method. You can add additional colors if there's a particular kind of problem you're working on that maybe involves a great grandparent line, for example. And Genetic Affairs is another one that lets you, it actually takes your raw data and auto sorts it for you by the clusters of people that are matches to one another. So this can save you a lot of time of doing it manually, and also produces a nice visual. And this is a really nice, clean example of clusters in this picture. If you have endogamy in your tree, meaning you have a line in your family or multiple lines in your family where they intermarried within the same group geographically or culturally a lot, then your clusters might look kind of crazy. And I'll put a helpful link at the end to an article about how to deal with endogamy in your matches. But both of these tools I showed you, they're really nice because they can help you make a nice visual representation of what your matches are. Gedmatch Genesis, it's a site that was originally built by two people who wanted a better way to compare DNA results from different companies. There's a ton of tools on there. There's ethnicity calculators, ways to analyze your matches with others. There's a few trait tools. There's a tool called a Lazarus tool, which can let you try to recreate which genes an ancestor of yours had exactly by putting in data from multiple descendants of that ancestor. This is the tool that's mainly been used by law enforcement for solving crimes. Their terms and conditions now are such that you have to opt in to allow your data to be able to be used by law enforcement in these kinds of situations. Otherwise, they can't use it. So hopefully, all the random things here, there's a variety of things I've talked about. There's been something useful that you didn't know already or that you might want to check out more. And in addition to that, I have a bunch of links here with just even more information on some of the topics I address. There's the article I mentioned from the New York Times about how to protect your data. There's a blog called The Legal Genealogist, which she's a lawyer and also a professional genealogist who talks about ways that the law and genealogy interact, whether it's in traditional or DNA research or, other ethical kind of things with genealogy. There's a article written by someone who took multiple genetic tests for health and what she learned from that, which was a cool experience to read about. And then there's another article about chromosome browsers and how you can use them for research. There's Kitty Cooper, which I've mentioned before. She has all kinds of good articles on her blog, but she goes in depth on how to use DNA match clustering for your research. And then there's another article on her blog by a guest expert who I've had some professional work that I've done with as well, Paul Woodbury, who talks about if you have endogamy in your DNA, what you can do with it. It's not a instant, brick wall, but there are workarounds, even if you have a tree that's endogamous, that's making it hard for you to sort your matches. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email them to the FHL webinars and they can forward those to me. I've gotten some of those forwards and those have been fun to respond to. And I'm ready to take any questions if there's anybody here with questions.
All right, the time is open now for questions. You can type those into the chat box. There is no handout for this webinar. However, I will post all the links that Sarah mentioned in today's webinar, along with the recording of this the recording of this webinar. We'll keep that chat box open for a little bit, but I'll move to our closing screen. Our next webinars, they will be at a little bit different than usual. We're going to have one on Tuesday, the 5th of November at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. That'll be an introduction to Chinese genealogy with Matthew Tyler. And then following that, at the regular time on Thursday at 3 p.m., on the 7th of November, we'll be hearing from Angela Sinikis, who will be giving a webinar on Lutherans in Lithuania. If you came in late, a recording of this webinar will be made available on our YouTube page and our website. I do apologize for kind of the backlog of webinar recordings that haven't been posted yet. It's been a little bit crazy here with midterms at BYU, but they will be posted next week. If you have any questions or requests, you can email fhl_webinars@byu.edu. And just like Sarah said, you can email me and I will pass on that question to her. Thank you so much. We hope that you have a wonderful weekend and happy Halloween.